Shaq Leonard will miss time in regular season. How will that affect the Indianapolis Colts? And to help answer that, I got my man Kevin Bowen on here today, 107.5 The Fan, Kevin's Corner podcast. You can even catch him with Kevin and Query in the mornings. How you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, Zach? Good to see you at camp a few days ago, and I'm doing good. Enjoying the rainy off day.
Yeah, it is definitely a gloomy day here in Indianapolis for sure. Let's just dive right in. I mean, Darius Leonard, obviously, what are the implications in your mind? How that affects the Indianapolis Colts, moving forward, and just your initial thoughts on that injury and how it's going to affect the team.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of unknowns still in his availability to start the year and what September is going to look like for him. I felt like this was a really odd and weird injury situation. Obviously, it lasted over a year. He played through it at times. At other times, he didn't look like his normal self at all. And then the back surgery, just anytime you involve that, I think stuff gets complicated there and just less than ideal. I also feel like I just got a vibe where just Leonard wasn't himself. He's a unique individual, loves the game of football, is uber passionate. And I just felt like a little bit of that was lost. I think he's mentioned some of that, some off the field stuff as well. The defenses looked really good in camp, but Zach, you'd be lying to anybody in saying that you wouldn't be better without him on the field. He's such a dynamic playmaker. He's different. He takes the ball away. I mean, you watch this camp, it's not like the defense is taking the ball away every single day, which I think is a good thing in the sense of like they're getting off the field just kind of naturally. But when you add that element, now you become a different level unit. So it's worth monitoring, certainly. He looks okay. I mean, looks fine, but it still seems like just a little murky on exactly when he'll be back.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, what would you say to the small fraction of fan base that say, Chris Ballard has really kind of botched these injury things? Do you tie that in and group that in with some past things, or is this kind of its own issue? Is it separate, and you don't really fault the organization for how they've gone about and handled this situation?
Yeah, Zach, let me preface by like any medical question, I just feel dumb answering it because I know nothing. So it's always awkward for me to talk about injuries or any sort of timetables. The Andrew Luck and the Shaquille Leonard situations, they're most relevant because they're such marquee players, and their absences have been, long in just kind of just seems like in a way they haven't been maybe as properly diagnosed as other injuries are. And that just can be life in the medical field. I mean, I'm deal with, people close to me family wise that have dealt with medical, issues, and you feel like you have one thing under control, then another thing pops up and things like that. And these aren't, NFL football players that are, exposing themselves to car crash type hits on a weekly basis. So I think part of that is just, it is an element of life in the NFL. The Colts injury numbers, though, you can't ignore them. They're at a very high level. They have been for the better part of the last decade, and that extends, of course, well before Chris Ballard. And, I understand what Ballard is doing in that, first off, he overhauled the nutritional program, overhauled the strength and conditioning program. Medical staff has largely stayed the same, but he really doesn't like to commit to a lot of public timetables. I think that's something he doesn't want to like set that, hey, you got to hit this date, and if you don't hit it, sorry about you, or it's going to look like you misdiagnosed or something went wrong. He feels like that's a bad look, which I totally understand. If I were in his position, it'd be a bit awkward as well. And outside of Leonard, I mean, we're recording this right at the midway point of camp. I mean, that's it. Everybody else has been healthy. I know Campbell just missed the last day, but I mean, it has been it's been the healthiest camp I've ever seen. I mean, 21 of 22 starters out there for every single day. No veteran rest days. I mean, think about how many of those we've seen over recent years. Stephon Gilmore every day, DeForest Buckner every day. I mean, a little bit of pitch count, but still, I think outside of Leonard, you got to feel really good health-wise. We'll see what Campbell in that situation, but I think you feel really good about where things are at.
Yeah, I would say, injuries are a part of the game, and they're definitely unpredictable, Kevin. But that being said, we still got to play football. And we're leading right in to go and play the Buffalo Bills this weekend on the road. Just your initial, what are you looking for? As you've seen us play against each other in pads, it seems like the defense has had the upper hand throughout training camp. But that being said, Is there anything that you're looking for in that game? Hey, I want to see this because I just don't know.
Well, I think you got to start with how much are the starters going to play. And I know that's up in the air as we record this, but how much do you play them? It doesn't sound like they're going to play much against Detroit the following week. Obviously, they join practices, but not in the game. And then Tampa Bay, the final preseason game, they will play a little bit more. So I think anyone that's heard me talk about slow starts to seasons, the preseason in general, I feel like the Colts need to play their starters a little bit more. If you look at Matt Ryan's career, Zach, I found this interesting. He didn't play last year in the preseason. Obviously, COVID the year before that. But if you look at like 2016, 17, 18, 19, he played a good amount in the preseason. I mean, he's coming off an MVP season and felt the need to, throw 20, 30 passes in the preseason. So I know the NFL league-wide has largely kind of changed their approach, but I think it's really important for the Colts with a new quarterback, a new defensive system, 2 new offensive line starters, those things. The last 2 days of practice have looked sloppy offensively, passing offense-wise. I think it's really important for everyone not named Jonathan Taylor, frankly, to be out there. So I think that's what I'm looking for. And then when you get outside of that, the starting battles, rookies emerging, special teams, I think is always big. Kicker battle, what does it look like in live reps? I made this analogy this morning on our morning show. So many people send me like videos of Rodrigo Blankenship in the summer, kicking a 65-yarder on a high school football field and wherever. And I make golf analogies all the time. I've been on the driving range and I hit a shot and I'm like, that is beautiful. That is perfect. And then I get to the course and all of a sudden I see water and a bunker and I'm like, oh boy. And I try to hit the same shot and I top it. Something like that. That is a little bit like the NFL offseason for kickers when you just can't script 11 guys on your side of the ball, 11 on their side of the ball. They're coming at you. They're trying to block the kick, the timing of the snap and the hold. You've got to get the proper height on it. Those things. So I think with him and Jake Verity right now, that's another storyline to keep an eye on for Saturday. I went on Buffalo Radio earlier in the week. They didn't seem overly optimistic they would play their starters. So I don't know if that'll impact the Colts at all, but we'll find out Saturday at 4.
Well, I mean, one thing I think about in my mind, and we've probably talked about it through DMs over the years, the definition of insanity is doing the same exact thing and having the same exact approach and expecting different results.
Right.
You got to go at it a little bit different, don't you, Kevin? Like you've got to at least go out there and be representable because at the very least you can say, week 1 and week 2, we look slower than the other teams that we're playing against. I don't know, all of these teams have their own different method of how they, metrics of, hey, this is the best way to play. But I would say that the injuries are a part of football. Right. And unfortunately, that's the worst part of football, but it's still a part of football. And I think you have to have these guys, especially as we lead into the wide receiver group. We don't know what we have. Like we're still sitting here in the middle of camp. Ashton Doolin has looked pretty good, actually. I mean, he's made some plays. But beyond that, I listened to your podcast that you put out last night, and the guys' catches in training camp, like live bullets, 11 on 11. Right. There's nothing to really just go home and say, okay, this is something that is really, really positive, and we can build on this momentum.
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to hit on there. I think you bring up a lot of good points. First off, just the overall starts to seasons. We talk so much about 8 straight season opening losses. It's deeper than that, though. If you look at the month of September, and I looked this up the other day, in the Ballard era, which, again, the GM and the head coach kind of set the tone for training camp. In the Ballard era, I think the Colts are 6-11 in September. That's the 4th worst record in the league during that span. You're just behind the 8 ball every single year, it seems like. And now you put so much pressure on the rest of the season. Now, there's been several years the Colts have got themselves out of that hole, but it's just a dangerous game that you don't want to play. The other thing when you bring up wideouts and just pass catchers in general, again, the last 2 days, drops, timing, miscommunication, ball placement not as on point. It's 2 full padded practices. That I think is something to note as well. There was a play yesterday over the middle. I think it was Nick Foles to Jelani Woods. Woods gets his hands on it, catches it, and I think he kind of turns to like go upfield a little bit, or I guess it would have been diagonal. And I think Zaire Franklin was right there and hits him. And I mean, certainly doesn't hit him to the point where he takes him to the ground, but Woods drops it. And it was one of those footstep plays. Like, going over the middle, you're going to feel that. And again, when these guys are in training camp and they know that they're safe, they're not going to get hit to the ground, and you're already dropping some balls. what does that look like when it's a game setting? Brandon Faison had to play against Alec Pierce in the end zone yesterday. Pierce wide open, makes the catch. Faison hits him, drops the ball. I guess in that case, it's two rookies. I mean, two good hits, well timed. But I think just those reps, it's so hard to simulate. It's so hard to replicate. I get it. You run a little bit of a risk for injury, but I think if you talk to anyone that's played in the NFL, they will tell you some level of sparring, some level of live reps is necessary. Yes, the game has changed a whole lot, but those first two games, two divisional games on the road, they're just so critical to get in your back pocket. If you can do that, you almost feel like you got a little house money week 3 against Kansas City. So, again, I've always been a proponent of playing in the preseason. And really, outside of Taylor, Zach, I don't know how many people I put on the I don't need to see them list. I think you got to play the offensive line guys because you don't want Ryan out there behind, backup O line. Maybe Buckner, maybe Gilmore, maybe Ngakwe. But I would like to see the vast majority of them out there. I know Reich has hinted at it. I'll kind of believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of fingers crossed as we go down this road, and we'll just see what happens. You got to feel like, though, they're going to do a little something different. As far as the wide receiver group, I am kind of pro bringing a veteran wide receiver to kind of help this young group come along. What side of the fence are you on with that? Would you like to bring somebody in, or you say, hey, we're just going to have to go out there and play football and see what we got?
Yeah, I would like to see a veteran brought in. I know I'm really harping on the last couple of days, but it was just a reminder of um, I don't feel a lot of trust in the pass catching room. And I say pass catching a lot because I think you group tight ends with the wideouts. Um, it's not an overly explosive group either. So, if you look at the chunk plays in camp, I wouldn't say the passing offense, excuse me, has had a ton of those. And something I was talking about a little bit earlier in the week on our morning show is when you're missing the fundamentals, like when you're dropping balls or there's mental mistakes, it just adds to the pressure. Like when you're not overly talented at wide out and tight end, you've got to be perfect in the fundamental areas because the timing have got to be on point. You can't be dropping the balls because there's not going to be many opportunities in the passing game, I think, to create a ton of plays. And yesterday there was a moment late in practice where Jonathan Taylor rips off a 60-yarder, and it reminded me so much of the New England game. Just a really kind of lull day for the offense, and then boom, Taylor with a blink of an eye changes everything. And he's such a special talent, and you've got to take advantage of his opportunities that he'll create in the passing game as well. And I get the veteran wideout pool is not very deep right now. There's probably questions in the T.Y. Hilton camp of does he want to play? Does he want to play for X amount of money? Those sorts of things. What would his role look like? There's agents around the league that I'm sure like telling their guys, hey, be patient. There's going to be injuries that'll develop, and now your market will go up as well. So again, it's something that I would pursue, but it seems like right now at the midway point of camp, nothing on that front.
Yeah, man. And one thing that I think that we probably haven't talked about enough on this show is, Nyheim Hines seems to have this connection with Matt Ryan. He's a rare, unique guy. I know you alluded to it yesterday, on your pod with you and Chris out there saying, when you're third and short, fourth and short, you've got to have those two guys out there on the field. And I'm so for that as well. I've been yelling for that at Frank Reich, all last year. But now it's a little bit more like you have a capable quarterback. He knows what to do. Like he's able to read defenses efficiently. You have someone you trust. And those are really the two players on your football team that need nothing. They need the football in their hands, and they can literally turn a little bitty play into a home run. I mean, you just alluded to the Jonathan Taylor, running all the way to the house against New England and kind of bailing us out. I don't think I've jumped that high in 20 years, man. I'm 40 years old, and I was like a little kid. It was unbelievable, but that's what he gives you, right? Like that's what he gives you. And the same thing in Hines. I mean, he's a real weapon if you use him well. And I think that dynamic of those two people and that relationship and that bond between Matt Ryan and then those other two backs, that's crucial in those short down yardage just to keep those chains moving all season long.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. Especially when your quarterback is not mobile. I think I always joke about how much I love watching Navy run their offense because there's so many options with what they can do, and obviously the triple option, fits it perfectly. But what I want in those short yardage situations are options. I want seeds of doubt in the defense. I want guys on the field that can do things in multiple ways, and that defense doesn't necessarily know what exactly that guy's going to do or where he's going to line up. The big playability is so there for both Hines and Taylor. And the other thing, and they've done it in a variety of ways in their careers, the thing too, Zach, is like them touching the football is a high percentage touch, aka a handoff or a pass to them is going to be completed 90 some percent of the time. It's just the nature of the running back and when you hand them the ball, either in the backfield on a handoff or a little dump or a screen or something like that. Whereas, like, and I guess I'll just take Alec Pierce, for example. You watch Alec Pierce's big plays at Cincinnati, a lot of stuff had to go right for Alec Pierce to get a chance at the ball. I mean, the national title game is probably a great example of it. There were times where he was open against Bama. I mean, I've seen the film, but an O-line breakdown, a Desmond Ritter misread, and they don't see Pierce 20 yards down the field and give him a chance to make, 50-50 play. Whereas with Taylor and Hines, again, they've got to do a lot post-catch to create the big play, but at least you can give them the opportunity for that touch. So, yes, last year, it was so head-scratching to me why they weren't utilized more on the field together. This year, they've been preaching it since January, and if you've been out at camp, anybody that goes out to camp, if you were charting like personnel groupings down, Hines and Taylor on the field together have got to be one of the more utilized personnel groupings so far. So I think the words and the actions in camp have backed each other up, and I fully expect that to happen this season, and it needs to happen. And I don't get too much into this, Zach, but like financially, you're paying Nyheim Hines a good amount of money. Utilize him. Like he makes top 15 running back money, and I get that he does more than that, but you utilize him because he is such a rare weapon.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Last question before we get off here, Kevin. I was listening to the interview that you and Jake did with Chris Ballard, and Jake really pushed, and he wanted to know what the definition of a real good season was going to be, right? And he just said, "We just want to get better tomorrow. Better today. We want to." He wouldn't go there. But in your opinion, what is Kevin Bowen's definition of a good season with what they've done this offseason, who they've brought in, and expectations that are reasonable for this Colts fan base?
Yeah, I think it's making the postseason. It's winning the division. Someone brought up a few months ago. I don't know, maybe it was like after another Final Four announcement for the city of Indianapolis or some sort of kind of event thing happening downtown. They're like, what marquee events do you want to see Indy hold? And I saw someone point out, like, how about an NFL playoff game? And I'm like, boy, that sounds like kind of harsh. And then I'm like, wait, it's been 8 seasons. I mean, that is an eternity, especially for someone, Zach, kind of like around our age group where, we just kind of got used to this city hosting that. I'm also a really big believer, and I was talking with an NFL coach the other day about this, and your guys need to experience what the postseason is all about. When you look at the COVID playoff game with Buffalo, something, but it still wasn't, that exact 60, 70,000, only game in town, those sorts of postseason moments. So for Pittman and Taylor and Nelson and Leonard, I guess, did it in their rookie seasons, but them experiencing that again, those guys, Julian Blackman, Bobby Okereke, it's just so important, I think, for them to get a taste of that, feel what it's like. So I think winning the division, a home playoff game, advancing the playoffs obviously would be a goal as well. But I think getting that taste is really, really important because we saw it with the Manning era. I think you started to see it with the Andrew Luck era. There's kind of a linear progression that you want to have in the postseason. You don't always have it. Manning era is kind of a step forward, step back. It was a little bit back and forth. They finally got there in 06. The Luck era, it was progressing, some injuries. And then 2018 happened. They won a road playoff game. Obviously, we know everything that happened after that. But I think it's critical for this franchise to experiencing that. Get used to winning. Get used to being a front runner. Get used to having a bullseye on your back and delivering with that bullseye. Last year, they had a bullseye in week 17, and they wilted the final 2 weeks of the year. So I think getting used to that, playing with the division lead, those sorts of things, making Tennessee, Jacksonville, and Houston look at you on the schedule and think, oh, wow, man, gosh, that's going to be tough. I think it's important steps for this franchise to take.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. And it just feels like you start with a division, you get in the playoffs, and the modern day recipe of the NFL right now is pretty simple. You build a really good structure around the team, you bring a veteran quarterback in there, and you got a chance. So it'll be interesting to see as far as that go. Before we get off here, what you got going, Kevin?
Yeah, I'll be back up at Colts camp tomorrow. So 1075thefan.com. I did kind of do a daily notebook recap from camp. We do a YouTube video as well on 1075 The Fan. And then have our morning show, 7 to 10 a.m. If you're listening here in India, it's 93.5 and 107.5 FM. And if you're listening outside of the market, you can stream it, iHeart app, all those areas. We do a podcast from the show each day as well. So just message me if you got any questions on that. And Zach, always enjoy our conversations. It was fun catching up at camp, and thanks for having me on.
All right, man. There you guys go. Kevin Bowen.